Welcome to the New Peak Podcast, the show for high achievers and leaders who want to sustain performance under pressure. Here's your host, coach and author of Burnout Be Gone, Nicola McCrabb.
Hey Naomi, welcome to the podcast. Great to have you on with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a real privilege.
Do you want to tell the audience where we first met?
Sure, Nicola. I can still remember and see the first day that we met in Belfast campus. I was a little bit probably anxious as the deadline for PhD was coming to a closure and presentations on the day of the conference. But it was really great to meet you there, Nicola.
It was great to meet you too, and great to be back in Belfast, Naomi. And it was my first academic conference that I presented at, the HRD, Human Resources Conference at Ulster University. And I was nervous too. I remember being very anxious. But all those familiars, the rain, the food, made it felt very comfortable.
You can't be in Belfast and go past Victoria Square and get a treat. And I think after that conference, and especially when it was your first conference, you deserved a treat from Victoria Square.
I appreciate that. Yes, the treats were amazing. Naomi, tell us a little about yourself. It's always great to know our guests.
First of all, Nicola, I suppose I have a passion for people, and that's what took me into my career in HR. I started off as a HR practitioner, both in manufacturing and in higher education. So I had a mix of working in private sector organisations and public sector organisations. Mind you, both came with their own challenges. And then I specialised in employee wellbeing. And I suppose that's what led me into doing my research around employee wellbeing.
I love that mixture of working in HR, working in academia, that whole mix that brings that whole person into it and sees it from different perspectives. So let's talk a little bit about that transition you did actually from HR into academia. What was that like?
It was quite the challenge, Nicola, if I'm very honest. It was probably one of the biggest challenges I faced in my career to date. Moving from being a practitioner where everything was operationalized and your initiatives were implemented to being an academic and exploring what wellbeing intervention staff wanted to not being implemented was a real challenge. And I really struggled with that, if I'm honest. But I suppose one of the things that made that challenge slightly easier was being recognised for some of the awards as part of my PhD. So I won five different awards, both nationally and internationally, for my PhD research. And that, like, when I was really struggling and really challenged coming from that practitioner background into a researcher academic type setting, those awards reminded me that actually this research is valid and it's really important in our workplaces. So yeah, it was a challenging experience, if I'm honest.
I can see that. And just when when we don't see a lot of things moving quickly, getting results, there's always little keys somewhere, isn't there? And we have to hold on to those. And that's fantastic. Congratulations on all those rewards, Naomi, because that helped you keep going. And it helped you see that they were meaningful.
Well, I think you've hit the nail on the head there, Nicola. When you're a results-driven person, which I am a results-driven person, it's very hard moving at that slow pace. So that is one of the main challenges that I faced. Like, and as a HR practitioner, we were results driven, and we were trying to focus on just in sickness absence numbers and improving employee engagement and employee well-being. So that transition into academia, where I didn't see any of those results actually being implemented, was a real challenge.
Well, it was a different type of indicator, but nevertheless, you did see that it was being helpful.
Yeah.
So what do you think pulled you towards research and employee well-being in the first place?
Oh, so that's one that I love to talk about, Nicola. I worked in employee wellbeing, seen lots of different examples of employees really struggling in work, whether it be work-related stress, burnout. So I developed a real passion for employees and their well-being. And I felt that there was that question around how can we support employee well-being better and more meaningful? And I suppose that's what stimulated my research into employee well-being. So that's why I took my career break to do my PhD on it.
Wonderful. You're that people person, huh? And you felt
Yeah.
like you wanted to support these people better. So give us a quick overview of the project.
Sure. So I interviewed 50 participants across two educational institutions or two tertiary educational institutions in Northern Ireland. So Ulster University and Queen's University. I interviewed a real mix of staff from operational staff, professional services staff, academic staff, um, senior leadership to understand their, I suppose, lived experiences and perceptions of employee well-being. Some of the quotes were very interesting. Some of the, you can imagine they were all interviews.
Yeah.
So I collected over 500,000 words of data, Nicola. So you can imagine,
Wow.
like, for example, employee well-being isn't just a fad, it's a priority. I'm a senior leader. I look after the well-being of all 200 of my direct and indirect reports, but who looks after my well-being as a senior leader?
Totally. And I'm sure you had some great Belfast sayings and all those too, huh?
So I had some more or some slightly less professional quotes than
Yeah,
that, which we'll save for another time.
sure.
But yeah, the findings was really interesting. And then I suppose I had to analyze all the data and write it up. And some of the key findings that came out was around workplace community and that sense of belonging, emotional intelligence and emotional awareness,
Mm.
and being able to have those emotional intelligent conversations, and around emotional credibility and leadership.
Very interesting. Emotional intelligence. So would you say that's what surprised you the most?
I would say the biggest surprise I got, Nicola, having worked in employee wellbeing, I felt that as a wellbeing practitioner,
Mm.
we should be implementing the so-called pink and fluffy
Yeah,
employee wellbeing
yeah.
interventions, like mindfulness and
Oh,
Indian head massages and
mhm.
yoga and all those types of things.
And there's
When
nothing wrong with a bit of
actually,
that. I had a great massage at the weekend, I have to tell you, Naomi. It was fabulous.
And that's true. One of the
Mhm.
one of the points though that one of my academics raised was, when these Indian head massages are put on during our busy time when we're marking assignments, they're not ideal because we don't have time to attend them. So
I like
yeah.
that.
So what I perceived my recommendations to be were going to be more explicit
Mm.
pink and fluffy
Yeah,
interventions, if you like, when
yeah.
in actual fact it's really around emotional credibility and
Mm.
leadership being sensitive and compassionate and trustworthy of their staff, and having given them autonomy and flexibility.
Yeah.
It was really around developing peer trust and rebuilding those fractured working relationships.
Mm.
Um, More
Hmm.
about bringing your whole self to work rather than parking your personal self at home and bringing your professional
Yeah,
self to work.
yeah.
So I would say those were the most startling
Mm.
findings, and what I hadn't really expected to find.
Thank you for sharing those. And that's so interesting because it's not about the fluffy. It's really just band-aids, huh? And
Yeah.
typically it's something deeper that will sustain people over time. Like you talk about the leaders supporting people, building that trust, bringing the whole person to work. Was there something that leaders simply were not providing?
So I think from the participants that I interviewed,
Mhm.
Nicola, the problem that leaders face is because they're so under-resourced and financially
Yeah,
constrained,
yeah.
they're operating at such a vast strategic
Mm.
have they have such an outlook on strategic importance
Yeah.
and strategic building and trying to operationalize everything that they need to do, that they actually forget to consider how they communicate with their staff, how
Mhm.
emotionally aware they
Yeah,
are with their team. And like some of my participants said, my senior leader can't change
yeah.
the direction of travel from her directors, but
Yes.
she can have a very impactful way in the way she delivers her communication.
Yes.
So the way in which she communicate with staff, I think, is of such
Mm.
importance and such value.
Yeah. And so remembering that because you're right, leaders are overloaded.
Mhm.
They
Yeah.
have so much on their plate. So they need support within organizations as well to help them build these skills to be more empathetic and to communicate better and show better support to their people.
Absolutely. And I suppose that comes back to the point that I made of the one of the senior leaders who I interviewed that had 200 direct reports, but who was looking after their well-being. You know,
Yeah.
I think it starts at the top down and filters its way down. And I suppose
Mm,
that's something as institutions that we need to get better at communicating the importance of emotional awareness and emotional intelligence and building that culture of positive communication
yeah.
and how we communicate.
Yeah, for sure. Empathy, caring about people, positive communication, really having your team's back so that they know that you're there for them and you're going to support them through their difficulties, but that there's somebody there to support the leader as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like you say, top down.
Yeah.
Now, so if you could shift one thing, Naomi, in your research and what you find out about how organizations approach well-being, especially for people under pressure, what would that be?
Well, I suppose, first of all, people under pressure, everyone's under pressure, Nicola. I don't think we've operated in as volatile a society in history. And so the pressure is real. It's real for all
Mm,
employees
yeah,
and
well
senior
said.
leaders. Yeah, but I suppose the most current key theme that came out from my research is that building emotional credibility into our leaders as soon as they join the organization or
Okay,
if they're facing a promotion within their organization,
okay.
being emotionally aware and responsive to the likes of feedback, 360-degree feedback
Mm,
from their peers, their colleagues, their clients, their managers, suppose any key stakeholder that they interact with on a daily basis and receiving that feedback on, well, how can I be more empathetic? Or
yeah,
how could I have done that conversation better?
yeah.
Or how could I communicate in a way that you would find that would stimulate you and help you to be more innovative and creative?
Yes, because that 360 is so important because we're not aware of our own blind spots.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think that's something that leaders struggle with because they
Mhm.
are so funnel minded, I feel like, and so focused on
Yeah.
what the strategic objectives of the organization is that they actually forget how they communicate with staff. And it's not necessarily their personality, it's not
Mm,
necessarily that they mean to be
yeah.
hurtful
Yeah.
or harmful,
No.
but sometimes that's how it happens because we don't have time to be emotionally aware, if you like.
Yeah. So giving people the opportunity to build those skills, as you said, it's not because of our personality, it's not because of things, it's just sometimes we're overloaded. And so giving everybody the skills to operate in that way can really make a tremendous difference in organizations. People leave their bosses, they don't leave the job typically. And so we want to set leaders up for success so that they can support everybody in the best possible way and empower everybody around them. And that starts with communication, Naomi.
Yeah, absolutely. That also comes back to your psychological connection, Nicola, and building that bond and that sense of belonging in the workplace and that sense of community. And once you can establish that within your team and build that rapport,
Mm,
then you can get discretionary effort from your team. And that's where highly pressurized leaders want to be.
yes, it starts with that trust and then
Yeah,
it just builds.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so thank you so much for sharing all that wonderful research. That was really great. And when you feel pressure building in your own work, what helps you to stay steady and effective?
Yeah, and working in academia, Nicola, to be honest, is very highly
Mm,
pressurized because we are forced to keep up with trends and research. And, we, like as a HR
mm,
practitioner, HR academic, educating our next generation of HR professionals, I have to stay ahead of trends. So it can be very stressful as well as producing research outputs.
that's a lot.
So what I would say is, I once had a manager who was actually a coach, and I
Mm,
still have that coach, and they've been fantastic. And they gave me a piece of advice that I never forgot. They told me, open up a thank you box, and for every
mhm.
time that you get a thank you through from a student or your manager or a colleague, put it in your thank you box. And when you're having a really crappy day, which we all have, go back to your thank you box and read those thank yous, and that will help you to remember, actually, I do have a purpose, I do add value, and I do have a lot to bring to my role. And I have to say, it really works. It might sound very simple, but it does work.
Yes, you know, Naomi, it's often the most simple things that have the biggest impact. So when you're feeling crappy, look at
Yes.
your thank you box.
Yes, and I do that. I go back through and it's amazing what you forget and who you've
Mhm.
helped. And some students, for example, getting their distinction in their dissertation and
Yeah,
they think that you're absolutely incredible and you're the most amazing person
yeah,
ever. You've changed their life and they
yeah.
are truly grateful and appreciative for what you've done. So maybe when you have a complaint from another student, it's nice
Mm.
to read a comment like that.
Yeah, that's really great because I know for, our audience of high performers, they typically always looking forward to what they have to do in the next challenge and they never look back. They never take time to savor those things that they have done in the past. So Naomi, really helpful. Okay, so Naomi, just finishing the podcast up now, is there anything you'd like to leave the audience with today?
Well, probably my key tip, Nicola, is communication and how we
Mm,
communicate. And I think as highly pressurized leaders, if we can build in some time to reflecting on how we communicate and how we use our emotional intelligence and emotional awareness to communicate with our team and build a rapport with them, to create that psychological connection and maintain
mm.
discretionary effort.
Yeah, I think that's so important and so glad that you brought that up near the end, Naomi. And it can make such a difference to employees or people under pressure. Just to feel heard, feel seen, feel supported can make all
Yeah,
the difference in those moments.
absolutely. It either makes or breaks a psychological connection.
Yeah, totally. Well, that's wonderful. What a great point to leave on today. Thank you, Naomi. So, where can people get a hold of you?
Probably the best place to touch base, Nicola, is my LinkedIn profile. And if there's anyone has any questions or requires any more information or support on what I've done, I'm more than happy to share that.
Perfect. That's great, Naomi. I'll be sure to put a link to your LinkedIn profile up there. And listeners, feel free to go and talk to Naomi about her research. This was fantastic. I hope to see you in Belfast some other time when I go back home. We thank you so much for coming on our podcast.
So thank you very much for having me. And yes, you know that you'll be more than welcome back to Belfast anytime.
Thank you listening to the New Peak podcast. If you want help sustaining performing under pressure without burnout, head over to nicolamccrab.com and chat to Nicola.